Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Sustaining Sustainability. I'm your host, CB Bhattacharya, Professor and Director of the Center for Sustainable Business at the University of Pittsburgh. This week, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined from Chicago, Illinois, by Kim Frankovich, the Global Vice President of Sustainability for Griffith Foods worldwide. Griffith Foods has been bringing food science into the food industry for over 100 years to improve safety and nutrition. As of 2020, they not only held an Ecovadis Silver certification themselves, incredibly, even over 60% of their suppliers were bronze certified or better. Griffith reduced manufacturing waste to landfill by 41% from 2014 to 2020, with 13 of their facilities sending zero waste to landfill. Kim joined Griffith Foods in 2022 and brings over 15 years of experience in sustainability in the food and packaging industry, with interests in preserving forests, human rights, and improving farmer incomes. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. So happy and energized to be here.
Great. So Kim, tell us about Griffith Foods. Is that something we would see on the supermarket shelves or somewhere else? Tell us about Griffith Foods and possibly then, what is the purpose of the company and how is that connected to nourishing the world sustainably?
Absolutely. Happy to share more about Griffith Foods and what we do. So we are a fourth generation family-owned business that started over 100 years ago on the south side of Chicago. And it was started by a father and son. And we had our beginnings in food safety and quality. So if you think back to what the food supply might have looked like in 1919, it wasn't very safe, wasn't very interconnected like we see and have the big supermarket shelves like we do today. So we were actually early in the development process of bringing food safety and quality to those food supply chains. And some of the things around when you think about that is, cured meats, making sure we don't have foodborne diseases. That was our early beginnings to now where we're at today, which is where with Brian Griffith, who's our chairman of the board. And he has expanded and set us on a course to blend care and creativity to nourish the world. Where you would see us is in the spices and blends, flavors and textures on some of your favorite foods in the aisle. We bring flavors to life as well as nutrition. So that's a little bit about Griffith Foods. We've also got about 4,800 employees worldwide, operating in 40 countries, and more than 340 food scientists and chefs. So it's a fun playground.
Fascinating. Yeah. So I saw that you have programs supporting regenerative supply chains, such as direct support for agricultural producers and sourcing Forest Stewardship Council certified fiber in 92% of your fiber packagings. What role do you play beyond just being a buyer, and why?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, even as a buyer, we set a huge goal and also influence around the requirements to be a supplier for us. You mentioned the Ecovadis certification. So one of our commitments is around ensuring that 100% of our spend is with suppliers that are Ecovadis bronze certified or higher. What that means is those are companies that are doing work on environmental and social conditions in their supply chain and setting not only policies and procedures, but also taking action to improve the environmental and social conditions. So first and foremost, it's sort of the selection process. The second way is by influencing and catalyzing support, not only for regenerative ag, but sustainably sourced raw materials, by making them a standard in our products, so that our customers and you, the end consumer, are receiving sustainably sourced and highly nutritious ingredients. And the third way that we also do it is actually working on the ground with farmers in our sustainable sourcing program that are actually growing chili peppers, garlic, and sage, other spices that you're familiar with in your kitchen cabinet, and working with them directly on the ground through extension teams on good agricultural practices.
Yeah, so this sustainable sourcing program really sounds quite fascinating. And I read that about 1,200 farmers were impacted by this program. Could you tell us a little bit more and how you are partnering with small farmers to achieve your sustainability goals and, help farming communities?
Absolutely. It's one of those initiatives and pieces of work that starts at the very base, right, where our ingredients start, which is with the farmers and the communities. We've set targets to reach 10,000 by 2030, and we're doing that today through our Tarova team, which is a sister company and part of the Griffith family that identifies farmers and communities for us to work with to grow and source many of our spices that I'd mentioned previously, chili peppers, garlic, sage, and we're doing that in here in the United States, in New Mexico. We also have sourcing origins in India, in Albania, Vietnam, and in countries in Africa as well. So what we do is that team is made up of over 50 specialists that actually work directly with the farmers, not only to train them on good agricultural practices, but also to get them ready for third-party certification. That's really an underpinning for us, which is we want others to check our work and make sure that we're doing it properly. And companies, or I should say certification teams such as Rainforest Alliance or Muddy Boots, will then come in and certify the farms and the conditions under which they're grown. So not only through the good agricultural practices, but also educating about shade trees and diversified farming, regenerative agricultural farming, keeping inputs to a minimum, are all things that our teams are able to directly impact with those farmers. They interact with the communities by actually community engagement and listening to them on what is needed and most relevant for the support in not only the farms, but also the communities. So examples of that are around co-investment around freshwater tanks for the communities that are then owned and operated within the community, partnering and working with local schools to help on the education, but also the training, I shouldn't say training, the education, equipment, et cetera. But that's about a deeper engagement on listening to them on what their needs are. And what that means at the ultimate end is that we have a selection of products that are actually traceable then from the farm all the way into the factories and into the products that then we blend for our customers.
That's really impressive. And it's great that you talked about customers, because you not only work with farmers, but you also work with chefs and food scientists. So how are each of these functions interconnected in the product development process to ensure that sustainable outcome that you were talking about?
Yeah, this is where the magic, this is where the fun happens, right? Which is with our chefs and food scientists. So first and foremost, most of the chefs obviously start with the ingredients, right? And many of them have been to the fields where our spices are grown, so they understand not only the conditions, but also some of the unique qualities, right, that come out of the important work that farmers do and how they grow what we source. They then partner with our food scientists, who are the experts around nutrition, regulatory standards, food safety, taste, texture, sort of how to bring these to life with our customers' products in mind, and also provide the functional and nutritional benefits, right? So those will come out in the recipe and formulations for our customers. They then work very, very closely with our customer development teams, right, on their needs and what are their needs as it relates to their final end product. And the intent and goal is to create products that are not only better for you, but better for the planet. So I've got some examples just to sort of bring this to life, which is one is around a moringa chimichurri sauce. The moringa is actually a tree that's native to India. It's very high in proteins, vitamins, and minerals, and it's very, very useful in fighting malnutrition. Another one is fonio grain tabbouleh. Fonio is a small grain from West African countries, and it has a nutty and an earthy flavor, but it's also packed with nutrients that are gluten-free and high in fiber. So that becomes an important substitute for couscous or bulgur wheat, which are traditionally used in a tabbouleh, but for those customers and consumers that are looking for a gluten-free product. More recently, we've had customers that are really engaged with us on circular design and product innovation, and that's where they have a byproduct in their food processing that they can't use and is a waste for them. So think about like chicken bones or spent grains, and how do we use those as an input into a coating, spice, sauce, soup mix to promote circular design thinking.
Fascinating, truly fascinating. And it's interesting that you mentioned customers in such a big way, because here at the center, we are in the thick of planning our next meeting, which is going to be on the customer sustainability interface. So can you talk a little more on how you are partnering with your customers, and perhaps, if you don't mind, tell us a few of your bigger customers and kind of what these relationships looks like?
So I can share absolutely on what we're working on. I can't necessarily share the customers. This is a pretty intense, creative space with our customers on who does their blends and some of their back end things. But I can give you some insight into the platforms. So we work and operate in different segments, right? So you can think about obviously the retail along your retail shelves, right? And any place where you would find spices, whether it's in a prepared rice mix, right? Or as I mentioned, a couscous or a tabbouleh mix. And you can also think of when you go to the prepared food aisle, which turned up a lot during COVID, which is you would go and buy a meat or a plant-based product that also had spices or sauces that were embedded in that takeaway thing that you could then make at home. We also, in terms of customers, are in quick service restaurants. So again, think of some of your favorite restaurants where there are spices, blends, coatings, and that gives you a flavor, as well as restaurants. So in the back of the house, there are soup mixes, sauces, etc. And how we engage with those customers is particularly around their sustainability needs is actually not only meeting them where they are, understanding what their goals and objectives are, whether it's net zero, whether it's actually utilizing regenerative materials, whether it's increasing plant-based materials in their product offerings. And with the chefs and food scientists that I mentioned, we will develop product development briefs with them. We'll go to them with our ideas on maybe potentially product substitutions that will make the end product more nutritious and tasty. So it's a very much about a product innovation process and platform that not only happens in our test kitchens, right? So we'll bring customers in and we'll have a fun tasting that's giving them different designs, concepts that they can then taste, feel, right? And learn more about how we make it not only in the test kitchen for them, but also where it was grown and came from.
Fascinating. And I wish we could talk a whole lot longer, but we're coming to the end of a time. So what call to action would you make to our listeners?
I would actually, my call to action is around bold implementation together. So we've had a lot of headlines in recent years around bold commitments, whether it's net zero, whether it's deforestation free. But now we're at the stage of bold implementation and doing that together in a way that's not siloed, right? Siloed, meaning getting outside of our functional areas, getting outside of our own value chains and actually working and sharing together what's working and more importantly, what's not working. Why I think this is so important is that we really need excellence in implementation on the ground. We're not going to be able to decarbonize, feed more people on the planet with less land available without that partnering together and doing it in a more timely fashion so that we can move faster and do it together.
Terrific. Kim Frankovich, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to spend some of it with us today.
Thank you very much. It was a joy.
This is your host, CB Bhattacharya, saying goodbye and look forward to seeing you next time on another edition of Sustaining Sustainability. And before I sign off, I do want to say this podcast is made possible with the help of my colleagues, Chris Gassman, Senior Associate Director at the Center for Sustainable Business, and Kristen P. Ahern, Center Program Manager. I'm your host, CB Bhattacharya, and I hope to see you again in a few weeks for another edition of Sustaining Sustainability.